All right, welcome back to another Python video. Today we're going to talk about and demonstrate the uses of the enumerate function in Python. This is a prerequisite for my next video where we're going to go over a Python practice problem, and one of the highest rated user submitted solutions uses this enumerate function. So I thought let's talk about this first and then go look at that practice problem so it all makes sense. And if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. That way you don't miss any future content. And also, feel free to check out my website. I'll have it linked down below, codingunderpressure.com. You can find more content out there if you're interested. So what is the enumerate function and what can it do? So let's just type enumerate and pass in this list I created called L, and it has a few values in this list as test the enumerator. And if we hover over enumerate, it'll be nice enough to tell us the enumerate object yields pairs containing a count from start, which defaults to 0. We'll see what that means here in a second. And a value yielded by the iterable argument. Sounds like a lot, right? And it sounds a little bit confusing. And if we go to print this out, it's not going to be any less confusing. So if we print this, it's going to be an object, and we're not going to get much out of it by printing this alone, but let me show you. So we'll run this enumerate, and here we go. We get an enumerate object at this memory location. Great. So how can we actually view what this function ends up doing? So if I want to, and this will make it a lot more clear, I can do a for loop. So for I in enumerate L, we're going to pass in this iterable, in our case this list L again, and let's just print out I this time. And now if we run this enumerate, we see that it returns tuples. We have a 0 and then test, which is the first value in our iterable or our list right here. We have 1 and then the and then 2 in enumerator. And now it might make a little bit more sense. So the enumerate object yields pairs, in our case tuples, containing a count. So it's going to start at 0. That's what this is, the left value of the tuple, or the very first value of the tuple. It's a count, and it's going to start at 0. So 0, 1, and 2. And then it's also going to give us each value. And so there's another parameter of the enumerate function. As I mentioned, by default, the count starts at 0. That's what we see here in the first value of each tuple. It goes from 0, 1 to 2. But if we want to change that, let's say we want to start at 10. We can go ahead and pass in 10 to the second parameter. Run this and notice the difference starts at 10 and then it increases by 1 accordingly. But I don't have a real use case for that, so we're going to leave it as the default 0. And there's something else you can do. We can read in both values of the tuple in variables in this for loop. So instead, I'm going to say for I, comma, n in enumerate. And then we're going to print I, and let's also print value n. And if we run this, it's no longer in the tuple form. We're printing out the first value of the tuple, so I, and then the second value of the tuple, which is the value from the iterable. And then notice what this is really doing here. This is the most important part, especially when it comes to the practice problem we're going to do. What does test correspond to? Well, in our list, it corresponds to index 0. And what does the correspond to? It's index 1. So what this can really do for you is it can keep track of what value is at what index. And that can be important because if we use the index of method instead, right? If I go ahead and print l.index of the, that's fine if there's one the in the list, because if we hover over this, it tells us it returns the first index of value. So if there's another the later on down the list, like right here, we're going to get index, and let's get rid of this now. We're going to get index 1 only. We're not going to get index 1 and index 2. But if we loop through and enumerate, we can see all of the places and all of the indices that that value occurs at. And that's what's going to be important for the next video when we talk about the Python practice problem. So feel free to check that out, and I hope to see you in that video as well.